Yes, and I suppose with that being said, we can go ahead and get started here, and may have some folks kind of trickling in throughout. But first and foremost, wanted to thank you all for joining us today. Our topic for the day is the migration blueprint, and really what we want to discuss is how we're helping customers make that migration over from other CRMs to Microsoft Dynamics and make a lasting impact on their business. So today, you'll have a few of us that'll be speaking to you. Chuck and Mike, do you want to go through introductions first here?
Of course. I'm Chuck Ingram, been working with CRM since before some people on this call may have been born. But I've actually been working with Microsoft Dynamics since version 1.0 alpha, not even beta, alpha. But I blessed to work at congruentX and serve as a CEO where we help people get CRM right so they can grow.
Thanks, Chuck. I'm Michael Hauk, one of Chuck's partners at congruentX. I serve as the Chief People and Experience Officer. Not quite as long as Chuck, but not far off. I started with Dynamics in 2003 with version 1.2. Been in business for a little over 35 years now, and anxious to hear what people are dealing with right now.
Thanks, Mike.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Lane, I am a CRM technical specialist at Microsoft. Been with the company for about 7 years now, so not quite as much experience as Chuck and Mike, but certainly have been living and breathing this topic for quite some time now, and is a passion area for me. So definitely excited to speak with you all. So I'll give you a sense of the agenda today. Again, really what we want to talk about is how Microsoft is easing the pain of making that migration over from other CRMs to Microsoft. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we're hearing specifically from customers that have made that change, and there's certainly been a lot of them recently. How Microsoft is helping to solve a lot of their pain points, and what that's resulting in from a cost and value perspective for those customers that have made that change. We'll do a little bit around analyst backing, so you certainly know it's not just us saying these things. And then we'll get into a little bit around the how. When we look at the migration tactics and outcomes we're trying to drive, how do we lay the right foundation to make that change effective and produce the types of outcomes that we're looking for from an organizational standpoint, as well as how to manage that change effectively. I think there's inherently some things from a technology standpoint we do well to help capture that user adoption, but also there are things we can do as an organization to set ourselves up for success in doing that change. First and foremost, wanted to talk about what we're hearing from customers that are making that change from other CRMs to Microsoft. And I think, certainly a few things that are probably resonating with some of you in terms of, hey, we feel like we've been overpaying for some time and not really seeing the type of value from the software that we were promised or that we would expect based on rising costs. We talked a little bit about user adoption previously. I think a lot of times when we are, having these complex implementations that are expensive, they're over customized, there's a lot of integrations, probably in a multi-cloud scenario that require a ton of ongoing maintenance and enhancements. Not only is that costly, but a lot of times what we hear from customers is that people aren't using it. They're not seeing value from the software from an end user perspective. And really, CRM as it was built, maybe a decade ago, was a management tool. It was a reporting tool, and it was really meant as kind of that business data decision-making type of tool. And I think CRM has gotten a bad rap because of it. It hasn't really provided that value for end users, and it feels a little bit like Big Brother. So, ultimately in today's economic climate, I think everybody I talk to is having to produce more revenue without increasing headcount. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of organizations moving from other CRMs to Microsoft at a pace that we haven't really seen to date. So want to take a look at why is that and why is that happening. Now, obviously, this slide has a lot of information on it, but I'll boil it down into what I think are the important areas. First and foremost, and we'll touch on this in a moment, we are half the cost of many of our competitors, but nobody's switching just based on price alone. We also have some really compelling total cost of ownership examples that we'll share later. But I think we talked about two of the things that are really important in terms of value drivers. And number one, having a uniformed platform that is not only producing the types of data insights that management and executives need to be able to make effective decisions, but we're also boosting productivity and user adoption because we're bringing CRM into the tools that sellers are using most often. And that's a huge value in terms of making a salesperson be able to work in those tools effectively. It reduces the friction of data entry for the business, and it allows them to get value and time back in the flow of their work. So we think that's absolutely crucial. And an element that we've brought to that experience now is obviously AI. We'll take a look at an example of kind of what we're doing with Microsoft Copilot and now with agents as well, that can start to automate a lot of business processes in the background and really create more of that autonomous CRM type of experience that I think a lot of people have been looking for a long time now. One thing I'll mention is we also have a replacement program that we're currently working with customers on. And this is something that we can talk with you all as a follow-up about and kind of look into whether or not it would be a good fit. But this program is really targeted to be able to provide a white glove type of service through a dedicated Microsoft team with partners such as congruentX, to be able to really follow, I like it, Chuck, follow a proven methodology in terms of success so that we can align all three parties, customer, partner, as well as Microsoft, on project outcomes for success, timeline, scope, cost. We'll do a total cost of ownership and cash flow analysis, really to be able to give you that data you need to make an informed decision on migration. And obviously demo being a part of that as well. So all of those elements, we believe, lead to this area right here, and that's better outcomes. Whether that be improving your cash flow position or ROI, getting more value out of the software, and know that you're making a bet on a cloud provider that has shown the ability to innovate in this space and has been a market leader for the past several years now. Okay, so I talked a little bit about ROI and savings. I think certainly ROI is one thing. And I mentioned, significant savings in comparison to competitors of 50%. We've actually seen with customers that we've made this migration with that the total cost of ownership reduction is actually 60%. I think we obviously talked a little bit about some of the areas that we believe lend itself to some of those outcomes, but it isn't just the cost reduction. There's a value increase as well that we're bringing, and not only is that coming from Microsoft placing a focus on continuing to provide value for our customers based on their investment, continuing to innovate. Microsoft has always been an engineering first company that happens to do sales. And I think we've seen our competitors take a different position that hasn't always allowed them to be able to continue to provide value, especially when using a growth through acquisition model versus Microsoft, who has really built their entire tool set from the ground up with the intent of making sure that it all works together. We talk about ease of use and user adoption. That is higher with Microsoft because of the fact that we're meeting your sellers and tools that they already use. So there's a lot of value to be had even on top of reducing or managing some of your costs. Now, I talked about meeting your sellers where they work today, and that really has been a fundamental shift in how we're viewing CRM. You may have seen, some of our leaders, including Satya Nadella, talking about some of the changes that we think are coming to SaaS applications as we know it. But really, this thought process of autonomous CRM, where I'm able to converse with an agent and have a conversation about data that's being pulled in from CRM, being able to write data back to CRM, and also be able to initiate automated workflows with an agent is something that we're seeing our customers already using. And in fact, in many of these scenarios, your end users are not going to have to make that swivel chair move from application to application much at all. And it's really something that we think is important to prevent. There are studies that show that each time we're making that change between CRM and a system of productivity such as Outlook and Teams can cost an individual upwards of 25 minutes of peak productivity. So we want to be able to proactively meet the seller with suggestions to update data, keep that clean and hygienic, but also give them the information that they really need to produce more effective customer conversations in the tools that they're already using. Now, I mentioned a little bit about agents, and this is a busy slide, but part of the reason that I wanted to illustrate all of these is because I do think it lends some credence to the vast amount of possibilities you can think about when we talk about agents. I think this concept of Copilot versus agents is one that maybe is a little bit confusing, but really think is Copilot as your user interface in the new age. Copilot has the ability to go and pull data and reason over a vast amount of data sources to really give you the information that you need from within the tools that you're already using. Our agents are really that one-to-many type of workforce that are going to go and complete actions on my behalf. So from a sales perspective, we see a few examples here of a sales qualification agent. So the way that may function is that sales qualification agent is meeting me within Teams, letting me know research that it's done about a particular individual, the buying opportunity, pulling from LinkedIn Sales Navigator data, as well as potentially 10K priorities for a customer, really unifying that data and proactively giving it to me within my flow of work in Teams, so that when I go and give John Doe a ring, I have the most up-to-date and informed position possible to really be able to help John achieve what he's trying to achieve with our products or services. Same sort of concept here with a sales order agent, really the goal being that we're reducing the amount of manual effort in some of these routine tasks from order processing to make sure not only we're producing more accurate orders, but we're increasing the fulfillment speed of those orders. Certainly other examples, and happy to talk about some of those in a follow-up as well. I think one of the things we kind of see when we have these conversations is, the cost savings sounds great. The total cost of ownership sounds great. You all are obviously doing some innovative things with AI. I think the sentiment I've heard from a lot of customers is that all sounds great, but the pain of change is immense for us. That's a big hurdle to climb. But I like talking about our experience at Microsoft in making this switch, because it is an adjustment in how people work that takes some intent. But the results that we've seen at Microsoft within a Salesforce of over 35,000 people is immense. Looking at a significant 79% reduction in administrative work, I can attest to that. I no longer take notes on meetings. I'm letting AI do that for me. I can focus on my customer conversations and go back to an AI transcription to know what I need to follow up on and know what we discussed. And I think that corresponds to deepening the customer relationships, right? When I'm present, I'm having a better conversation with you than when I'm focused on taking notes into CRM and making sure data is up to date. And that's resulted for us in at least a savings of 90 minutes per week saved for an average seller. Now, I know some folks on that we've spoken with in the past have looked at that 90 minutes and said, it's not about time savings for us. But I think the way that you want to look at that is that time savings is time that can be spent back with your customers, helping to produce revenue. So when we look at how Microsoft provides that incremental value, that time savings ultimately can lead to an increase in revenue because we're scaling our seller ability to reach more customers. Now, I mentioned I wanted to talk about some analyst perspective as well. And I think Microsoft has a benefit in the business application space that we are the only cloud provider out there that also offers business application, CRM, ERP across the board. And you'll see here by this graphic, whether it's Salesforce automation, low code development platforms, robotic process automation, we are in the leader quadrant in every category. So if the Gartner Magic Quadrant is something that is important to you and validates, who is really innovating in a space, I think this is proof that we are really creating an ecosystem of tools meant to solve for a lot of the problems that you've likely been experiencing. Now, with that being said, I mentioned I know a lot of this is like, yes, that sounds great. There's a how behind it, and there's change management behind it that we want to discuss. And Chuck and team have some great perspectives on how we go about doing that. So I'm going to hand it over to Chuck here to kind of take us through that step.
Thank you, Andrew. And that's awesome. I forgot, Tasha, to ask you, and maybe we can get people to raise their hand or something, but I wonder how many people who are on the call today are in IT. How many people are in sort of revenue leadership roles or RevOps? So I see some hands coming up on the IT side. Oh, she's fast. Look at that. So every story has a hero. And in our story, we have a chief revenue officer who has a really important job. They have about 18 months to be successful. They usually come into the job and they're told that they can't hire new people, and they look in their CRM and their data is bad, and they can't tell what their team is doing, so they can't coach them. And they're, as Andrew said, the team's being forced to do CRM instead of doing their work, which is selling. It feels like more people on this call are a little more oriented towards the IT side, and that can be our hero too. And let's let that IT person be the hero, maybe a director of IT or who owns the CRM system, or a CIO who's accountable. And you think about it, our hero in IT manages the CRM as if it's a product and as a part of their portfolio. They have to manage partners like us and Microsoft, and they have to, and sometimes they have investments in CRMs like Salesforce, HubSpot, etc., and Microsoft. So they've got to manage those relationships. But they also have to work with our friend, the CRO, or the vice president of sales, vice president of marketing. So they're internal customers. So we're going to get super duper practical today. This IT heroes up against bad data, rising CRM costs, as Andrew did such a good job articulating, maintaining a disconnected stack, and complaints from the business about poor adoption and kind of having to do CRM. So we're going to get super tactical. We're going to share a 4-step framework, which we use to help company in partnership with Microsoft to help companies move off their existing CRM with low friction and results on the back end of it. And we're going to do it by sharing case studies. We're not going to talk in theories. We're not going to talk about digital labor and things like that. We're going to talk about things that people are doing today. So Andrew, if you could please click to the next one. So while Nucleus, another noted analyst group, says that if about 51% of folks who have Salesforce, and I'll say the name, they do Salesforce wouldn't have a great market share if they weren't doing something right. So at the same time, a lot of people have it. And according to Nucleus, a lot of people would like to look into changing, but it's not a fit to change for everybody. So I'm not talking to everybody on the call probably. But what I can give you is I love frameworks, and I can give you a framework of 3 general questions you can ask yourself. First, even if we can save you money, if your revenue from 3 dimensions is crushing it, it might be hard to get the business on board with it. So, and I'm not just saying making your numbers. Revenue performance is good. That's how much. We want to look at predictability. Can we forecast the revenue accurately? And we also want to look at insights. I used to play a little bit of golf, and sometimes I'd have a good round, and I didn't know what I did when I when I went out the next time. So we need to know what we did. We need to have insights into our revenue engine. The next piece is, how long is left in your existing CRM contract? We've all bought a car and wanted to trade it in, and oh, you haven't paid that down enough. It doesn't work exactly that way, but there's a little bit in that. And I think, Andrew, probably 6 to 12 months left in your, with 9 months a sweet spot. It's typically what we see where the justification makes a lot of sense. Is that what you're hearing?
Yeah, I would say we've worked with organizations that are anywhere from, I would say on the very tight end of the spectrum, I've seen 4 months. But ideally somewhere between 6 to 18 months is a great time to start an engagement with us.
Makes good sense. And like, how deeply is CRM plugged into your business? We talked to some clients, and I'm going to give you a real example where their adoption was, and Mike Halk will tell you, it was 0. And of their competitive CRM solution. But how good is their adoption? And adoption is kind of a cornerstone, because according to Salesforce, 91% of CRM data is inaccurate, incomplete, which holds businesses back. Is it also integrated into a company's processes? Have they built playbooks into the CRM that are integrated into their processes? So those are 3 general questions you can kind of ask yourself to see if this conversation is right for you. And Andrew, we're going to walk straight into an example. This is an insurance company. They're private equity funded. They've made a lot of acquisitions. They had some pain around just bringing these companies into the fold and having a critical event around driving results. Because when you work with a private equity company, it's awesome, but they expect things to happen. And one of the things they're worried about is the business disruption of having folks like me and Mike come in and say, tell me about your business, and do workshops for 6 weeks. And one of the things that Microsoft has done really interestingly in this is they give us a toolkit that allows us to do a lot of this work digitally and with AI. And you can kind of look and see, you don't need every feature that Salesforce gave you or HubSpot or whatever gave you, but you need the features that you wanted. And so what this insurance company did, and thank you for clicking, Microsoft gives us the people in this program access to this toolkit. It looks at what the client has now and what they need. It's basically digital interviews, and it gives you a plan for replacing like for like features. And it helps give us a little bit more time to talk about the things you really don't have that you want. So in this particular case, they saved about 50% of the time they would have spent in consulting workshops. If you want to have a sneak peek of what this experience is like, If you type in your browser www.salesforceswitch.com after this, there's a feature comparison. It's just Sales Cloud, but it has all the features of Sales Cloud, and it'll give you a feature fit from Microsoft. And most of the time, it's pretty close. Okay. Next one, a professional services company. Again, private equity funded, made a bunch of acquisitions, built a lot of customizations, and they were worried that data migration was going to be a big problem for them. And you can imagine a professional services business, and I happen to be blessed to run one, is I care about what happens with our clients, but I also care in terms of what we're doing on the front end of the business from a pipeline perspective, and I want to see it all in one place. So they often do some customization. So if you click to the next one, Andrew, please. Another benefit of this program is Microsoft has invested in providing partners like us a tool that instead of us say, tell us about your business and spending all this time looking at your data model, which is the entities in the tables and how they're related, and your data, it actually looks at that for us and gives us a huge head start on recreating the way your CRM looks in a new environment and pulling the data over to that. It doesn't do everything perfect, but it gives us a huge head start in the process. Okay, next one, please. This one's kind of fun. It's a distribution company. Again, private equity funded. They had a timeline for growth, and I'm looking down because they had literally zero adoption. And it wasn't Microsoft CRM, but I'm a CRM guy, and it hurt to see it. They didn't have a CRO. They had a chief commercial officer, but they couldn't tell what was going on in the field to be able to help the sellers do better. But from a seller's perspective, the sellers literally had to call the office before they walked in to see a client to see what was going on, or they could bring their laptop in. So you think about the way you do your life. Like I have 2 dogs and I take them for a walk after work every day, and I like to track it. I like to track it when I go for a run. But I don't fill out a form. It just my watch says, "Oh, it looks like you're going for a walk. Do you want to track it?" And I click yes. So what we built, if you click to the next one, please, Andrew, we used the Microsoft low-code platform, and it solved a massive problem. So they pull up at a client and it says, "Oh, it looks like you're at ABC company. Here's what's going on at ABC company. Here's what your wallet share is with this company. Here's what's on the truck. Here's what's not on the truck. Here's what you should offer to ABC company today." And this is important. And what else is important about this is Mike's going to talk a bit about this later, is this is a product to this firm. It wasn't a little project they did. It's almost like, how long did it take for Facebook to go live? It goes live every day. And that's the way that this firm treats this solution. Is it's so critical to their sellers. They went from zero adoption, and I put in the slide 10x, it actually 60x. They went from zero to the average sellers using this app 60 times a day, and they won a big award, innovation award, from a large retailer that they work with. And so we're super excited about what you can do with the Microsoft platform, and kind of why Mike and I bet our business on it. If you could click to the next one, please. This is where it gets really, really fun. So one of the things we talked about was, Andrew mentioned, was business outcomes on the back end of this. Is like, we want to save money, but we also want to help people sell more, help people serve better. And there's implications of that resonate at the board level. So saving on license 30 to 40% often, but what if we can help the revenue needle go up? And at the same time, we'll see things on certain websites. Okay, if you turn on CRM your revenue will go up 30%. Well, everybody will be in the Fortune 500 if that really happened. What we want to do is help nail a specific plan to help our clients get a business outcome around CRM. And that's exactly what we did here. If you click to the next one, please. congruentX has a solution that can go in, it mines your Salesforce data, anonymizes everything, and it looks like at it kind of like, anybody know much about lean manufacturing? Like the throughput of a manufacturing plant is only equal to the biggest constraint. So it looks for constraints in your revenue engine. It looks for leaks in your revenue engine, and it measures across your entire what we call a bow tie, and it measures three things: volume, velocity, and conversion. And it kind of spots those opportunities for what we're going to focus on. And we don't have to do workshops to do this. We can confirm it with workshops, but it tells us it's the real data. So that's really exciting. If you click to the next one, we'll talk about this. Is a real plan. It's anonymized a bit, but we figured out that if we could improve conversations by applying playbooks driven by Copilot, which Andrew mentioned earlier, and we do the same thing for cross-sell and upsell, these small changes, which are 2 or 3%, can make massive changes on the back end. So the board in a situation like this really loves that we can get, in this case, it was the real number, $16.7 million in revenue lift. So we're in the boat with the client, and in this case, we even bet a piece of our fees on helping them get the results. So save money on licenses, implementation's 50% faster, and they have a plan to show the board they're going to lift revenue on the back end. And Mike's going to talk about how we do that from a change management and an outcomes perspective.
Thank you, sir. So real quick, just a couple slides, kind of fundamental change management, right? Anytime you are either implementing a new system or replacing a system, that's an organizational change. And so I want to kind of set foundational knowledge of change management just to make sure we're all on the same page. And then to Andrew's point, I want to talk about differences in change when you're talking about a CRM system versus other systems. And then to Chuck's point, I want to talk about how our method for doing that, for managing and helping manage the change, produces those outcomes that Chuck talked about. So 4 main principles of change management. First, understand the change. And again, when I talk about this, it's not just you, it's everybody who's being affected by the change. They need to understand why the change is happening. Don't just assume because somebody who sits in a corner office made a decision that everybody understands why the decision was made. They know who made the decision, but they don't necessarily understand why, right? So when we talk about understanding the change, why are we doing it, and what are the key objectives? Again, when we talk about a CRM system, in this case, it's pretty apparent as to why we're doing it, and Andrew covered a lot of the reasons as to why organizations change CRM systems, but not all of them. What are the benefits to the organization? In this case, organization is a pretty big word, right? We're not just talking about what are the financial benefits and the outcomes. That may be why the leadership team has agreed to do this and to spend this money. But if I'm a salesperson, what are the benefits to me of changing the system? Because if the new system is no better than the current system, why do I want to go through change? Because leadership said so? I might have to do it, but that doesn't make me want to do it. And that's one of the things that we want to focus on. How does it impact people positively? Again, what's in it for me or with them, if you've ever heard that acronym, right, is really, really important when you're talking about change in systems. And last but not least, how does it affect the way that people work? Again, AI is everywhere and it's changing the way that we all work now, and that's just going to keep going. But as both Andrew and Chuck said, the idea is to bring the system to the people in the places that they work in the way that they want to work. Go ahead, Andrew, please. Thank you. Next, we want to plan the change. So who's going to sponsor the change? Do we have support and involvement at all levels? If the top gets it, but the middle doesn't, you have a problem. If the top and the middle get it, but the bottom doesn't get it, you have a problem. It has to be supported and involved at all levels. There are numerous studies that show if somebody is involved in a change, they are far more likely to accept the change than if the change is put upon them. Okay?
Mm.
So, who should be involved? There should be somebody in virtually every role, every level of the company. That doesn't mean we have to have a team of 1,000 people, but you want representatives and you want the right representatives in those roles and departments, right? Who's best positioned to communicate the changes? Well, that depends on your organization, but you need to know that up front. Who's impacted by the change? In the case of a CRM system, right? Typically, we're talking about sales, revenue, if you will, possibly marketing, or all of those. But the IT team's impacted because they have to support it, right? Management is impacted because the reports that they used to get out of the old system are going to be different in the new system, et cetera, right? So, how will you measure success? This comes back to the outcomes that both Andrew and Chuck talked about, and it's really critical that those outcomes are predetermined and agreed upon. And as Chuck said, one of the things that we do at congruentX that we think is fairly unique is that if we're involved in that process, we'll actually put part of our fees on the line to help that organization achieve their outcomes. That's how important it is in terms of change management and success. Go ahead. Implementing. Again, change agents in every role that are advocates or role models. Sometimes that's people in leadership. Sometimes that's just people who are influencers. Maybe they've been around for a long time. Maybe they're your most successful person. You've got to identify who the right people are. We have a process for that, right? Ensure everyone understands the execution of the plan. The communication and the understanding are critical. At any point, if that goes sideways, you've got to fix it before you continue on. You can't just plow through it and hope it's going to get better later. It's not. You want to have recurring meetings with those change agents and stakeholders on the progress, and you want to leverage your communication and training, which we'll talk about here in just a second, to begin the reoccurrence. You want the change to be incremental. You don't want a big change if you can at all avoid it. There's some degree that's going to happen when you switch systems, but you want to expose them to the system and have them involved so that they're already getting comfortable with it before they need to get comfortable with it. Next slide. Last piece, of course, is communication. Proactively communicate before you start as to why it's being made. Regular updates, periodic surveys to the team. Do they feel like they're involved? Are they getting enough? I realize it's a little touchy-feely, but again, there's all kinds of statistics and surveys out there that say if people feel like they're involved, they are more likely to accept the change than if they feel like the change is being thrust upon them. Okay? Last but not least, throughout the process, as you achieve milestones, as you make progress, as you build pieces of it, celebrate and communicate and promote the change that's going along the way, not just at the end when we go live. Obviously, go live is a huge achievement, but there's many achievements that happen before that. So those are the 4 principles of all change management. When you're talking about a change of this magnitude, you can't do it from yourself. You've got to have a team. Depending on your position, going back to the survey that was done earlier, right? If you're in IT as an example, if I think about the end customer, and if we're talking about a CRM system, the idea of a customer relationship management system is to serve the customer, right? So if you're in IT, you're at least 2 steps away from that customer. You've got the sales or the marketing folks on the front end. And again, we've got levels of those as indicated on the slide. And then you've got you. So you need to involve those people to make sure that the assumptions that you're making are validated, or if they're incorrect, that they get fixed along the way. Obviously, your organizational culture and what's normally accepted and not normally accepted in your process and your practices are a big part of this. But you've got to think about this holistically. Okay? Now, if you break people down, and you can see in the lower left corner of the slide, this is not an original slide. This came from the Thomas Kilmann conflict mode instrument tool that they have for engaging with people of different personality types and so on and so forth. Basically, they break them down into these 5 types. You can take a screenshot of the slide. You can ask us for the deck after the slide. This is what we do, is we help you identify across those roles, what buckets do those people fit in, and how should you engage with people in that bucket, and how shouldn't you engage with people in those buckets. I'm not going to read through the entire slide. You can read it. Like I said, you're welcome to take a screenshot. It's not an original slide. But it's really, really important that you don't think one size fits all and communicate the same way with everybody on the team. It never works. People are different. You have to respect that. Okay? So if we switch over from change management and now we come back to the outcome that Chuck talked about, this is an example, and it's really just blown up. Chuck had something like this on a previous slide, right? But the idea is you start with envisioning, you get into onboarding, and then you've got iterations depending on how big the organization is, how many users we're talking about, the features that we decide that we're going to put in our initial go live. That's going to determine how many iterations, maybe how many sprints, if you call them sprints, that you're going to have before you get into go live. As we said earlier, we don't want to try and do everything. We don't want to boil the ocean. We want to give them what they need so that they see value and advantage in going to a new platform, but there's always going to be a backlog of things that didn't get put into version 1, right? And as Chuck said, CRM is a product and it's always going to evolve. If it doesn't, that means either your business isn't evolving or you've got a gap between the business and the system that's supposed to support the business, okay? That's where you're going to adjust your outcomes after you go live and you figure out those increments, right? So we've got the what, the who, the when, the how, and the milestones in the plan. And you work through that iteration by iteration towards those outcomes that were agreed upon before we started the engagement. I think one more. When you think about change outcomes, right? We talked about business outcomes a couple times in the presentation. That's great. That's why it's in the middle. The people outcome, as we've talked about several times, is the engagement and satisfaction of your people. The idea there is that people who are more engaged and more satisfied in their job statistically prove to be more performant. That's what you want as a business, right? Last but not least, again, it's a customer relationship management system, regardless of what platform you're coming from, going to Dynamics. And so we want to make sure that we have no negative impacts to the customer, and hopefully there's some benefits to them as well. We can serve them better, whether that's faster answers, faster solutions, whatever it may be. There should be something in this process to the benefit of the customer. I know I went through this quickly. The idea is, this is why, as Chuck said, why we created congruentX, and our partners and us believe that helping clients achieve the outcomes that they desire are where there's a difference between how many people approach these kinds of engagements. Chuck, Andrew, back to you.
So it seems like we can, every stat I've ever seen says that about half clients aren't happy with their current CRM. So I think we've laid out is a framework, right, Andrew, that people can take a look and make that decision is, are these guys minimizing the disruption enough to see the business benefit on the other side of it? And it seems from summarizing here, 40% savings on license, 50% faster implementation, maybe even funding from Microsoft to help with the implementation, and a guaranteed revenue lift on the other side. So probably worth looking into for a lot of organizations. And so we wanted to give you a couple options here. One is we've built a guide. I mean, it even has how to negotiate with Salesforce. And if you decide to stay with Salesforce, that's still a good thing. There's a maturity assessment. There's a miniature feature fit calculator in there. and a return on investment calculator. So if you put your win rate in and you're in the professional services industry, it knows that in ProServe, the win rate is X. And so if you go to salesforceswitch.com, there's a bunch of this stuff, or you can skip to the punchline and schedule a chat with us. And we'll even invite Andrew to the chat. So Andrew, anything from your end that we missed?
No, I don't think so. Appreciate everybody hopping on. And, as Chuck said, we're very serious about, the value that we think we can bring to the market in terms of customer experience technology. We'd love to help your organizations if you've ever considered a change, and we want to make that change easy and something that produces, tangible business value for everybody that chooses to have a conversation with us. But if you're interested, let us know, and we'll start by giving you the information you need to make an informed decision. So appreciate everybody on.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great day.